Hello, and thank you for joining us. I am so happy and grateful today to have as my guest Carolyn Coleridge. She is a psychotherapist, an intuitive, a healer, and the author of the book Honor Your Spirit. Welcome, Carolyn.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for being here. Now, before we get started, I do have to say, I believe your mother is a heroine of She Did It First. Can you just tell us what did your mom do first? She did something first, right?
Oh, my mother, well, you mean like her psychic ability? She was a chemistry teacher
Did you
and
say she was the first Black woman to,
oh, had a
what
science
was it?
department in Connecticut. Yes,
She
yes.
was, okay, say it again, please, because I kind of talked.
To head a science department in Connecticut.
All
So
right.
she was, yes, she was a chemistry teacher and biology and a little bit of physics. But and actually her boss was actually John Mayer's father, the singer.
Oh,
Dr. Mayer was her boss. And then she became the first one in Connecticut. Yeah. And she got an honorary degree from Yale for helping teacher, an honorary degree from Williams, Teacher of the Year for helping students, minority students go to, and women go to medical school. Yeah.
wonderful. Thank you. And what was your mother's full name?
Una Idris Coleridge. Yes, she's passed on. And I dedicated my center to her because she helped so many women. Yeah.
Awesome.
And she
Thank
was
you.
also had mediumship experiences, a lot of visions, etc.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Una Ines Coleridge.
Idris.
Okay.
Yeah.
Idris, thank you so much. Okay, so I think where we want to start. So you're a psychotherapist, but you also have psychic abilities and intuitive abilities. So if you could maybe kind of tell us, how did you marry those two? Because science and very different spirituality usually don't connect together. But please tell us a little bit about your background, how you connected those two.
Yeah, and I think that, bringing my mother again, since she was a scientist and traditionally trained, she had a master's from Columbia. And my father was a social worker and a minister, then he became a bishop. So he was very spiritual, but traditional. My mother was spiritual, but traditional. So I saw both. Like, for example, if there was a ghost in the house, my mother would say, "There's a ghost." My father's like, "Okay, let me take out the Bible." And he, this 23rd Psalm, though I walk through the shadow of death, was like, "He's not gone." Though I walk through the shadow of death, he's not gone. Though I walked through the shadow of death before, and then she goes, "Okay, he's gone." And she can see it. That wasn't all the time, but and he was very traditional and Andover Newton PhD, theological seminar, but he believed, and my father was the Episcopal Bishop of Connecticut, first black actually. But he believed in my mother's ability to see and trust spirit and listen to the divine. And it's important to know that, psychic is of the soul. That's what it really means, because the name can be kind of tainted out there, and psyche is of the mind, but they're both together. We have a body and we have a spirit. So, connecting to the spiritual realm, why souls are here, why we are sent here, what's the real reason that you incarnated, is not to pay a mortgage, is not to, be in debt and all this stuff that's very limited. It's like, what is your soul here to express? I'm the person, the guy that will help people find that soul purpose. What did you and the divine make that? What did you write down in your spiritual contract? They call it the Akashic records, or the contract before you came in. And how do you know what happens when you come in? You feel called, you feel pulled, you're like, I should go into this, I should go into that. So I was studying at Columbia, and my mother said, if you get in, you're going, because I went. So I did. And it was very traditional, very, very, like, Ivy League, all stuffy. And I started seeing ghosts. I was living up in Harlem, because Columbia is by Harlem, and I started just seeing ghosts randomly. And I don't know if it was so many souls that lived in New York City, but I was like, what is this about? And I called my mother and I said, Mom, I saw ghosts. She's like, okay, okay. But how are your grades? Like, she didn't, dismiss it. And I just felt so called. And I had a lot of spiritual experiences, like meditating in my dorm room. I'm reading a book called, like, I can't remember the name of the book. It's one of those secret books you find in one of those spiritual bookstores.
Mhm.
And it told me how to sit a certain way with your head slightly bent, and I would meditate. And then all of a sudden, I saw my third eye open up. I literally saw an eye, and in the eye was these wisps of energy, like, sitting there. And I said, "Those are my guides." And I was like terrified, and I jumped back. And I thought it was 5 minutes. It was 45 minutes later. So I'd gone into another realm, and I had all these interesting experiences. I was so drawn to it. And I think it's important to know I was 28, and we go through soul cycles. there's 7 year cycles that our soul like kind of measures to grow and learn, just like 7 layers of skin, 7 wonders of the world. Seven is a very high spiritual number of the seeker. So if you look at, think of a clock, and then think of age 7 is when kids are, they're more their personality is there, and less of their spiritual, they're the cute and cuddly, like they're more formed. 7 more years is 14, and that's considered what, high school. 7 more years is like a clock is 21, and that's considered adulthood. When the clock strikes 12 is 28, and around that time the planet Saturn comes in. It really hits at 29.5 to 31, and all these issues, challenges come up to get you back on track. What are you here as a soul to do? So it may be problems with relationships, career, purpose. It might be a marriage you leave, all these different things. What am I here? Will push you. Saturn, they consider it Satan, but not negative, meaning like pushing you towards the light, the darkness pushing you towards the light. And right before 28, there's something at 27 called the lunar return. So the moon like kind of mirrors it before, and that's like the moon in like the tarot deck is what's buried, what's underneath. And a lot of things will come up at that time too. It could be a very, very challenging time right before the 29.5 comes up. So if you think of all those rock stars who died at age 27, Amy Winehouse's movie's coming out. She was 27. Kurt Cobain, Jimmy Morrison, Diane, what is her name? Jim Morrison, um, I can't think of Diane.
Janis
Can't think of her.
Joplin?
Why am I thinking Diane? Janis Joplin. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah. And then also Jimi Hendrix. Yeah. And so they all died at 27. It's like they call the 27 Club, and that's their lunar return. So that's a very, very heavy time of the soul. And a lot of people seek therapy at 27, but also at 29. And every 7 years it comes up. So you said mid 30s, if something may have happened like 35, so it just keeps pushing
Oh,
you because we are a soul and we're here to grow and learn. Those are markers in our lives. So at 28, I knew it was a Saturn return. I had to find it out. I did research because I felt so heavy, and they would not leave me alone. These ghosts, they would push my bed. They would talk. They were friendly. They were out. They were, Casper. They weren't scary. They were just like sitting chatting. I was like, this is like afterlife therapy. I'm trained to be a therapist, and these ghosts are chatting. And then what happens is you start going deep within your soul at that time. If you're trained, if somebody, it's easy to get depressed and maybe feel suicidal and maybe overdose or maybe, but if someone's there to say, no, 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 what does your soul want? And that's choosing your heart over your mind. And there could be pushing little things that push you. It could be a divorce, it could be a job loss, it could be a health crisis. These are things to get you back to why are you really here. So then I started studying about healing and energy, and to learn how to protect myself in so the ghosts weren't bothering me all the time. I learned how to work with it. And then I was quiet and silent, and I would study my traditional therapy, but then I would still do, like, I started training at the Edgar Casey Institute on the weekends, learning about how to do readings, and I was just drawn to that. I would go to a spiritualist church and sit in a circle and learn how to do mediumship because they were coming to me before I was even interested in it. And then I would go to a spiritualist church. It was actually Unity in Lincoln Center. It was Eric Butterworth's church. And he's long passed on, but he's a great spiritual teacher, Unity Church. And I would go in Midtown, and I would just start learning and learning and learning. And I felt my soul felt filled. I felt better. I felt this is probably what I'm here to do, but I didn't put into those words till years later. Because if you hear or see things, you're considered psychotic, and that is not good to tell your supervisors when you're working, and you're studying traditionally trained work. But I really listened to my soul over my mind. My parents did it, I was doing it, and I just waited, and I started dialoguing with the universe, reading Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Life. And I said, this makes sense. This totally makes sense. It's like in the recesses of my mind, I said, yeah, we're here to grow and learn. The universe gives us signs, there's messages, and just pay attention to that. Like I give you a little example. Like I was saying, well, why is this happening right now? I'm 28, I'm at the most conservative school. And I would go out in Manhattan, going to my, internships. And I kept asking, I go, they say, ask out loud. So I asked the universe, why is this happening right now? And then somebody would come up to me just randomly and say, excuse me, do you know where the World Trade Center is? I would send them. Do you know where Chinatown is? I would send them. I said, oh, yeah, because I was living in New York, so I knew the city. Do you know where downtown is? Or, 34th Street or, Times Square? I would send them, send them, send them. So one week it was 5 people. Okay. Next weekend it was like 10 people. Okay. The next weekend it was like 12 people. Every weekend people just come to me like a beacon. And I'm not a traditional New Yorker. It's like, why are they coming to me? I was a social worker. I had a kind aura, probably. But then what I kept asking the universe, what am I here to do? 18 people came up to me. Even my friend with me was like, that is weird. Like that is totally crazy. And I said, why am I here? And we both looked at each other and I said, oh, I'm here to help people find directions. And then nobody else came up to me. And the universe literally sent me something physically because I was picking up the New York cynical. "Oh, I want to see it, prove it to me." And they literally came to me after that weekend. Not too many people came up. I maybe one or two, but the message was heard and there was more messages to come. So there were a lot and then I started using New York City as a great place to train as a medium too, because it's so hardcore there. Because the skepticism makes you get really strengthened in your spiritual growth and development. So sometimes I would get like overwhelmed with. I did a 24 it was 24-month program. No, it was 16 months. So it was really accelerated program because I didn't get into the first one. So they said, we have a special program if you want to do it for 16 months. So it was really intense. Internships, writing papers, studying, all these different things. And I would be, complaining. My mother's like, you're at one of the best colleges in, the United States. Stop complaining. And I would, um, and whenever that happened, I would see a blind person in New York City with their cane. Doop, doop, doop. I'd be almost running into them in the subway. I would be, at a traffic stop and there's like, taxi would go crazy there and I'd almost like be right next to them. I would turn to be somebody coming out of a store and I would always see a blind person. And then it came through me, walk by faith and not by sight. And if a blind, that's like the spiritual, like working with the universe, if a blind person can live in New York City with this strong, I love New York, aggressive energy. I was born in Brooklyn, um, raised in Connecticut, but that strong energy, not feel afraid to be out there, trusting that a taxi won't hit them or someone would help them across the street, walk by faith and not by sight, and stop complaining. So that would put me back into I should be very much in gratitude for what I have, even though I had to pay these huge loans back, etc. So it was, and then I literally saw about 25 people. I kept a little book and I would just write it, write it, write it, write it. 25 blind people. And there were other ones when I was like, well, what am I supposed to do with the spirituality? And I would see Buddhists, I would see monks just in the middle of, and it's like, live your life spiritually. I'm riding on the subway, a monk with their long robes. Or I would see getting out of the taxi when I was getting in, and it was like, and I paid attention. The universe said, okay, you're cynical, you're picking up that, you're critical, you want to know. I was studying to be a psychoanalytic psychotherapist. Prove it to me, show it to me. Let me see the research. But Spirit was saying, go with your heart and let us show you within the physical world these beautiful experiences that we are showing you at this time to help you. And it keeps going on now, Just recently, I was in the airport going to LA to teach a class, and um, I was again like I'm like flying out there, and so many people out west are really into metaphysics and spirituality. And then out here where I am in Connecticut, it's a little bit more conservative, Puritan, traditional, and very much like metaphysics. What is that? Like, so it's not as so most of my clients are still a lot of them. I'm doing good work here, but are from LA. And I was kind of like complaining in my head, even though I had the autobiography of a yogi in my pocketbook when I was flying, and I was ran right into some monks, on the air, going to airplane, there are some monks saying, live your spirituality, because they live it completely. So it was just really about listening to the signs and the messages, just like it's said in Louise Hay's book, and it got stronger and stronger. And it's part of, like kind of who I am as a spiritual person. And I do want that, but as you get older, like the 7 year cycles, it gets tougher, it gets deeper, it gets more subtle, it gets it's just like going to grad school. You go, like, you get your BA, and it gets harder when you go to grad school. It gets harder to get a PhD. It gets harder if you do specialized training. And I kind of want to do specialized training. I'm very much into ascension. Years ago, not that long, ascension teacher came to me. I was going to a woman who was a Mexican American woman who had done a lot of spiritual, experiences. So I went to her group in LA, and it was just about connecting to your past lives. And she trained in the Yucatan, and she had this certain method of breathing where you kind of, and it's just a kind of a sacred thing that she taught. She went to the Yucatan, even though she was, American, but she went back and trained because she had her own incredible spiritual experiences. So while I was doing her class, and I would always seek, I would go to spiritual churches. LA is good for that stuff. I would go to, different teachers, and I was always at the Conscious Life Expo. It's a huge expo in LA, and it's massive. It's about 15,000 people come, and I was always on the panels. They put me on the panels and stuff, and which was great. There are old videos out there. So I went to her class, and then at the back of the room, I was very cognizant, very aware, and I saw this high being, like he looks Egyptian almost, and he had a turban, and he said, "Hi," big signs over his head. It was funny. I'm Serapis Bey. I said, "Hi, I'm Serapis Bey." I said, "I know that name, but who is that? Serapis Bey. I know that name." And then I remember in Doreen Virtue's deck, she had the Ascended Masters. I know she doesn't do that stuff anymore. And then she had Serapis Bay. I was like, that's weird. I Googled it online, not a lot of information. I pulled out all my books, all my spiritual books that I had. I had like 8 bookshelves because I was doing a lot of seeking, and I worked for a bookstore at one point, etc. And I couldn't find it anywhere. And I had all these books on shamanism. I was drawn to shamanism for a time, because I'm a therapist, and a lot of shamanic experiences are connected to um, breakdowns, breakthroughs. And then all these books were piled up on shamanism. And at the bottom, there was this red book. And I was like, I don't remember buying that book. I don't remember that book because I pulled out all the books, and it was red with gold letters. So that's weird. And I was just like, who is Serapis Bay? Who is Serapis Bay? And I was just looking around. And then that night I did another class after I had the experience. And the teacher, that Mexican woman, she's like, oh, that's the high priest of ascension. He's like pure white light. And I'm like, huh, well, let me get some information on him. So I went to a class at night, and it was Trisha McCannon. And she talks about, she's a wonderful speaker, um, medium, teacher, great book. She has channel books. And it said, she was teaching about Atlantis, and so, Atlantis in Egypt that night. And I was like, huh. And then it said that he was a high priest of Atlantis and a high priest in Egypt. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. So I go back to my house, and there's that red book, and I look at it, and it says it's the 7-7 book, 7 7. And it said, and it's a real book, and it doesn't have where I bought it. I don't remember buying it. And it says initiation into Atlantis in Egypt, parables. And I'm like, oh my Lord. It's like a 5D experiences book. I don't remember buying it. It's there, Rapis Bay. And then I didn't know what to do with it. So I read it and I threw it away. I was like, oh my God, it's so weird. And then later I said, okay, I have the book. And there were other experiences where I kept meeting people from Egypt. I just randomly different places. I meet people. There's a woman named Anna Christina. I think she has a book out there on near death. Um, and she had a workshop in LA. So I went to it, and she was talking about 222. I kept seeing numbers, and that was connected to her. She said that the Holy Spirit came to her, and she's very fair. She almost looks like you know, light hair. And I was like, okay, she was just telling her story, but she had an accent. And I said, well, where are you from? And she said, oh, I'm from Egypt. And it was just like, I kept meeting people randomly from Egypt. And I said, okay, so show me who you are. And then he came in my dream to Serapis Bay. And yeah, this long red robe on and gold embroiled, kind of embroiled. And he said, this is the universe. And I was like, oh my God. And then I kind of fell asleep. And he looked Egyptian. I kind of fell asleep. And then he's been coming. And then I started channeling him and stuff like that. Um, this is, I'm talking about a long journey of constantly seeking, constantly asking. And what was interesting in my book, Honor Your Spirit, the first book I had, the first cover had a golden heart on it. And then it also had a golden heart, and when I looked him up, it said he works with the golden sun. And when I was teaching people how to meditate, I would say, just think of a golden sun in your heart. That's interesting.
Mm.
And then one of my favorite crystals is clear quartz, and that was his crystal. Another one was um, oh, I can't think of it now. It was clear quartz, and not the zircon, but that was another. But I like that crystal. There it is. Thank you. Herkimer diamond. And then I love that. That was his crystal. And I'm like, whoa. So I realized, and then I kept talking about helping people find their purpose. Like I mentioned, souls, why are you here? Not just to work. And ascension is about finding your purpose and then ascending out of the earth plane. So I realized that we've been working together, but I was just not aware of him. The golden heart on my book, the crystal, the Herkimer diamond, the teaching people the purpose. And I would teach this at a major HMO. I would do the mindfulness class and I'd say, think of the golden light in your heart. So it's almost like he came to me saying, I see you, I hear you, let's partner up. So I've been doing, work, and then interesting enough, I've been doing work. I did a lot of channeling on him, and I met this woman. I did some Googling about Serapis Bay, and I did it on Facebook. And this one group came up created by this woman, Meher Feeder, and she's from India. And she has this whole group about Adama, et cetera. And then it had information on Serapis Bay. So I was telling her all my stories, and we're going back and forth. 6 years later, she makes me the administrator of the group with her. Now we had 24,000, now we have 47,000 people, but I'm able to channel him in there and, put information that I get. And, there's a positive feedback, but she's had experiences too, but she's like, no, and I was like, how did this happen? It was just weird, just trusting spirit, just trusting and going with the energy. And I feel like this is my next step, is teaching people, finding your purpose, doing your purpose, living your heart, your soul, and then ascending out of the earth plane, if that is your time. Making spirituality an important part of your life, pivotal every day, every way. How can you do to help somebody? Wherever you're going, how can you raise your vibration? Are you meditating? Are you praying? Are you listening to source? Are you connecting to your guides? Are you listening to your higher self, which is your soul? Are you, respecting and understanding your ancestors' path? Because some ancestors were great and some weren't. And sometimes they pass the baton. Sometimes we're changing patterns that they, didn't accomplish. And sometimes they're there as guides and angels. So all this is part of, all different cultures have the same thing. That's part of ascension. We're seeing it in movies, with Avatar, where they talk to the trees, which I feel like our ancestors, in many ways, because a tree trunk is, if you look at it, is very similar to the thumb sign. If you look at them, they look the same. Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So it's in the trees, you get sometimes when you connect to the tree, and then the divas and the angels and the guides and the fairies and the gnomes, like, the second dimension, and the crystals, which I'm very much into, which is the energy of source. embedded in the earth, Mother Earth, a seed of light into the earth to create energies contained of the divine, which I love, and held in the mother's womb, literally. So it's all like comes together, and that, yeah, that's kind of like that's been my
Well, thank
path.
you. Honestly, it's fascinating listening to you, and it makes me think of so many more questions. And I've
Okay.
said this before on the show, but my purpose in this podcast is, and I don't know if you saw my mouth dropped open when you said 35, because when I was 35, my life literally blew up.
Wow.
I was in the hospital having major surgery. My kids were 10 and 16. I had just had this operation like 2 days before, and their dad left for work and was dead within 45 minutes. So I'm
Oh
having
my
surgery. I'm
gosh.
trying to recover from this major operation.
Oh my
And then I get
gosh.
this phone call, so I have to get out of the house. It was just nuts. But so I started
Oh
going to a
wow.
silent chapel. I was
Mm.
very religious, very traditionally Catholic, went to church every morning, confession, taught CCD, everything. So because I was in so much pain and I didn't know where else to go but to God, and then I was evolving out of traditional religion, and
Mm.
it was beyond scary. I was terrified. I thought, this has to be the devil. This can't be true. I
Mm.
would walk the halls at night of my house, wringing my hands while my kids were asleep. Please help me. Please help me. I'm losing my mind.
Mm.
So the reason I wanted to do the podcast is because I do believe there's a huge evolution of spirit happening right now. I think it has a lot to do with the divine feminine, which is a question I'll ask a little further down the road. But anyway, so I wanted to have women talking about their spiritual paths, so it won't be so scary. It will be more normalized to step out of traditional religions and just follow our spirit and our souls where they lead us.
Mm.
And I heard you say something in an interview that I love about scared and sacred. Can you kind
Mm.
of expand on that a little bit?
Oh wow. Let's see. Well, it's interesting because a lot of times when we have to grow spiritually, and I'm so sorry for your loss. That is,
Oh, thank you. I
yeah,
was 35 a long time ago,
that's
but
okay. But that's
thank you.
that's
I
one of those
appreciate
big
that.
soul wounds.
Yeah,
That
yeah, it
is,
definitely was.
because you're so vulnerable when you're in surgery, and then to hear
Yep.
that, yeah, you have to heal. So, a high, and also stories like that, then you're like, oh, that's a high calling. That's a higher soul that had that experience at that time to, sorry, had those experience at that time to be able to, like you have to have the strength to go through something like that, in the sense, an younger soul wouldn't have chose. Then there's certain belief systems that we choose our paths, okay, or choose them ahead. Now, choosing a path, and I'll get back to sacred and scared because it kind of makes sense. It goes along with it. Choosing our path as a soul is very different than choosing your path as a personality. When we're souls, everything is perfect and love on the other side, and we're like, I'll do that, I'll do that, I'll do that. I'll help other women with a Her Story podcast down the line, and but as when we're down here, we're like, hell no, I'm not doing that. And then, pun intended, no, but but also it's hard because so whenever you have a higher spiritual calling, it can be very scary. It can be very scary because it pushes you out of their limits of the containment of the earth plane, which is very one dimensional, maybe 3D. Okay. But when you start working with spirit, it comes up to 5D or the higher, we've heard a lot about 5D, which is looking from the higher realms where the ascended masters, can come down to, and looking from the perspective of the divine. How does the divine, see you? Like from not from the scary person that you're in, but you have to take what you feel is scary and make it sacred. Okay. It's still like people say, this was so hard. It was such a sacrifice. There's that word again. You got to make it sacred. So if you have a sacrifice that you had to make, like as a mom, a single mom, then, and it becomes a sacred journey to open up to your spiritual gifts. And that's when you start calling in your ancestors, your guides, you connect to God. A lot of these things are set up for us to go back to the divine and to say, because a lot of times we don't look up unless, unless we're really desperate. Help me. And a divorce, death, illness, all that. You had, two at the same time, so then we'll look up and then we'll get the spiritual energy of grace, of God giving us, something that we need, another gift, another experience, a job that we may need, an opening, dreams that come, premonitions, gifts of spirit. So, and that could be being a good counselor, it could be being a minister, it could be being a healer. Once you get to the point of healing and helping others, if it's through a podcast or a counselor or a doctor or helping somebody just cross the street, being a doorman, a wonderful doorman, that is when you're doing God's work. And that's what we're all here to do. But unless we get hit upside the head, we don't remember that because we get so involved in the earth plane and all these other things. A lot of the stuff that goes on here are distractions from our true path. Like, so that's how you make what's scary sacred. You call in the divine, you call in your angels. Angels are free. They're just sitting around, blah, 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 and you call them in and they'll come and help you. You call in your ancestors. What did my ancestors learn or didn't learn? You call in ascended masters, which I didn't even know I was doing. I call in the archangels a lot. When I started seeing ghosts, I was taught to call in the archangels and surround myself with light, because then the ghosts, if there's so much light, the ghosts don't come because they're stuck on the earth plane. And when they see that light, they'll run. So that protects my field. So so as I call them in, every time I go to a hotel, I call in, because there's a lot of ghosts in hotels because they hang out with stuff that goes on there. So every time I go to hotels, I call in the archangels. When you go to sleep, that's when you're most vulnerable. So now I lay me down to sleep. I pray to the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. That's the most sacred time. So because you're going to sleep and you leave your body, you go up to the other side, you look at your book of life, and you're like, oh, I'm supposed to do that. That's deja vu. I'm supposed to do a Her Story podcast. Oh, that looks familiar, and then you come back down and you're like, how do I do it? So it just starts coming to you. And that's why people are like, I remember this. This is like deja vu already seen because you saw it in the book of life. So all these things, and sometimes when you come back in your body and you may not have said your prayers, some people get sleep paralysis and they're like, they can't move and they see a dark being. And it's because they didn't pray, because there are other lower entities that want a body. That's the one thing we should know is spiritual. Getting a body is very sacred. When you get a body, you come to earth, you grow a lot. You grow so much more than you do flown around in heaven. You grow so much through conflict, through contrast, through taking what's scary and making it sacred. Like the great example, a lot of examples out there, mother for drunk driving, losing your child. And she created this whole organization that helps other people. That's why I love like self-help groups and other groups and gathering people around. I think it's, that have gone through the same thing. And I do believe that it is the time of the feminine, the divine feminine, because it is a time of higher consciousness. We have to fulfill the book. We're on a female earth. Women are still dismissed. Every male child comes out of a woman. I mean, it's like we're in a female earth. It's not dad earth, it's mother earth. That's why crystals are getting so popular. She's giving a piece of her. I thought it as a regular Episcopalian, I said, this is wrong. We can't be looking at crystals. But I asked God, is it right? Is it helpful? And I've had powerful experiences with them, not worshiping them as a tool to connect back to the divine, as holding the energy of the mother in my hand, you know, um, planting. So the divine feminine is coming in because it's a time of the creator. We're in the Aquarian age, and women are natural creators. So we have to start reckoning women in Congress, the Me Too movement. All these things are coming up to respect women's cries, their souls, their stories, their histories. It's time. It's time. It's been happening for a while, but it's getting stronger.
Well, it's interesting because you just hit on my second favorite topic, which is the rebirthing of the divine feminine, which is another reason why I started this podcast, because I absolutely do believe that she's been buried within us. I remember one time a while back, I said, oh, the divine mother's waking up. And she was like, I was never asleep. You were asleep. So,
Wow. Okay,
so that's
chills.
really fascinating. But this is what I want to say, because I know there's a lot of people in traditional religions, and this is scary. And we've been trained very well that almost anything that relates to the divine feminine or the goddess is Satan. Certainly in my religion,
Mm,
as I've gone through the
mm,
decades, relearning, unlearning, remembering what was buried deep in my soul. And that is a lot of things that were associated with the goddess, because there was a time when the goddess was worshipped and revered. Were turned into Satan. Satan, that's the devil. So
wow.
here's a question for you, because I've said it's in my mission statement on my website. I do believe that women are major catalysts in healing the earth, but we have to heal ourselves first, because we're carrying a
Hmm.
lot of trauma and pain from not just this lifetime, but lifetimes. And so you are also a trained psychotherapist. So this is what my feeling is: the micro is the macro. And we've heard, obviously, the best environment for a child to grow up in a home is a loving mother and a loving father. We have not had a mother. Major religions, our societies, our governments are all Father, Son, Holy Spirit, male, 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 male. So
Hmm.
you have psychotherapy training. So can you kind of marry those two of what happens when a child is raised in a home with absolutely no mother love, no talk of a mother, and the
Mm.
difference when a mother is incorporated, and how that affects us as societies, and actually really the world, with not having any female spiritual. It's all father, father, father.
Oh, so spiritual. Oh, okay. So there's so much to unpack there. So actually, many religions, because when I was in New York City and that all those experiences happened, I was in a goddess circle, and I learned about a lot of goddesses. Like in that Japanese flag, that white flag with a red dot, that's Amaterasu, who is a Japanese goddess of love and compassion, Kuan Yin.
Mhm.
Did not know that. Yes, and also in a Muslim, the woman Aisha came to Muhammad in a dream and taught him, and then he was illiterate and wrote down the Quran. So Mary Magdalene, who they believe could have been Christ, his counterpart, of definitely energy and stuff I've learned from Shekinah, Shekinah,
Shekinah.
Sheki. That's it.
Shekinah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I said, yeah, you said it better. So I've heard it pronounced different ways. That's the energy of the feminine energy. A lot of religions believe the Holy Spirit is the Divine Mother. I've had people that I've known that have had near-death experiences, and they've met the Divine Father and the Divine Mother. That she's there, but she's hidden because like she's like just like what you said, I knew a reader and she said, oh yeah, that God almost protects her because she's very sacred and it hasn't been her time, but she's getting stronger. She's always been there. But in every major religion, I don't know all of them, but there are a lot of feminine goddesses, even Yamaya, who's the African goddess of the water. I mean, um, Oshun, and there's so many that are around. Guadalupe, So I feel like it's coming up, it's coming out because, again, being the creator. And once we start, it's almost like a lot of these guides come to me once I identify them. Like once I'm doing their work and the energy match, they come to me. I had that experience with Mary Magdalene. I didn't know who she was, and I was just reading a lot of books and then she came in my dream, and I was like, whoa. And she started talking to me about feminine energy and the balance, more importantly, the balance of the male and female energy is what opens up the third eye. So there was a
So let
balance.
me ask you this, Carolyn, before we
Yeah.
run out of time.
Okay.
So if you see an adult, and they're coming in as a client or a patient, whatever term you use, and they start talking, what would be the clues where you would say this child was raised without a mother? What do you see? What is a person lacking when they don't have the feminine, nurturing, loving aspect as they're being raised?
Okay. And do you mean like not raised as a mother physically in the household or not
Yeah, there's
raised?
no mother, this child, or
Oh.
an abusive
Hmm.
mother or an absent mother. How does that affect a person when they're raised without the
Oh.
nurturing, loving mother in the home?
Oh, yes. And, fathers can be very loving. but it does, gosh, I have so many women I work with that have mothers, but they have difficulty with their mothers. So a combination of both. So what sometimes you feel the lack of self-nurturing, the lack of learning how to take care of themselves. It can go two ways. Sometimes they can overdo it, like start learning how to take care of themselves very young. There may be a lot of resentment towards women, anger towards mother figures in their lives or support, um, or they
Wait,
overly,
Carolyn, I'm sorry to
yeah,
interrupt you, but listen to what you just said. That's so resentment toward women, anger toward women. And look what's happened in how our world is today. 1 in 3 women are sexually assaulted. There's so much anger when women try and use their voices. There's such a huge, and I think that's kind of where I'm getting to, because I don't have the education. It's just kind of a feeling I have that
mm,
what we see manifesting in attitudes toward females stems from there being no divine mother that we're
mm,
taught regularly. I know there's Eastern religions that have it, but traditionally Christian religions, Jewish religion, things like that. And that's kind of, that was my point. And you just said it perfectly, that that's what's missing in our society, and that's why there's so much anger and resentment toward women. Is it's like a kind of like, where have you been? Where,
yeah,
is that correct? Am I on the
yeah,
right curve?
no, absolutely. And what I've known, and there's another part being from Catholic, et cetera, is that working out here, there's a lot of people into witchy stuff, which is not always negative. And the Catholic Church allegedly took out. They wanted men were higher were gaining the properties when they were, but women were living longer because they work with the plants in the community and the food. So women lived longer. The women were inherit the properties. The church lost a lot of money. So what they did is they allegedly, it's going to be controversial, they wrote into the Bible to take out, that say that Jesus was partner and that he was celibate and that he wouldn't have, and the natural ability to create life, through is very sacred. So I think that backed up, maybe that's why there's so much abuse in the Catholic Church, but also the women didn't have places to live. And I think it was around the 1500s. So the women went to live with each other. They were homeless. They were scorned. They didn't have a husband. They were property, and they lived with each other, and that's where covens came from. And that's so they lived with each other, and they did prayer circles, and they worked with the moon cycles. It's really important to know that there's used to be 13-month calendar. Women have 13 periods, and 13 is considered an evil number. There's 13 full moons a year. Moon means mother, by the way. Moon means menses. And women, we incarnate into the mother, into matter. Matter means mother. So this was all part of the divine, orchestration of what we're supposed to do that was taken away. And then, Grimm's fairy tale and all these other books, they wrote about the wicked witch in the woods and the mean mother and, Hansel and Gretel, that she wasn't there. That was all propaganda to negate women's power to create just like the divine. So does that help? Did I answer the
Yes,
question in that
yes,
way?
I love that. Thank
Yeah,
you so much. Okay,
yeah.
so we're getting to where we need to close. Before we do, I just want to ask you one more thing. If you could just give us a few words about, you talk about manifesting through gratitude. Can you just talk just a little bit about that before we close?
Yes, everything we create is through frequency. So the more positive we are, and I think things are hard here, and the more higher we go, like even like the Democrats, Republicans, I think this is a lesson for us to go beyond what is just on the physical. Go to divine within your heart. And the more that you have a frequency of love and compassion and gratitude, knowing that if you believe that as a soul, we came here to grow and learn, have gratitude for the experiences could be so painful, getting a major disease or something. But, if you're happy about certain things or the little things, just like walk by faith and not by sight, keep reframing things, your frequency raises and then more comes to you. So you're able to manifest because as everything is a copying, like the more you start, meaning that the universe copies what we put out there. It's a copy. We're an energy frequency. We're a radio sensor, radio waves. So if we put out negativity, that can come back. Now I'm not saying bad things happen to people because of that. Sometimes things are preordained, but if we can start saying, okay, thank you for this, thank you for that, our frequency gets higher. The angels are in gratitude. We're more connected to the ascended masters. We're more connected to the higher beings. We're more connected to more good coming in, because with that gratitude comes the energy of grace. That's the divine being able to come in when we least expected, things that we couldn't even ask for, things that that's why we're gracious. Be gracious, gratitude. It's all the same frequency. Gracious, thank you. Thank you for giving me this food. Thank you for that. It's all about understanding the energies, our frequencies, and that we can manifest from a higher frequency if we, work with the energy of understanding universal law, universal words, and how we create with our words and with our energy.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. And I did say thank you this morning because as soon as I woke up, I got the hit that we were on different timelines. And usually
Ah,
I mark that down and no, and I missed it. And I contacted you. I was like, what time is it right now? And I realized that I had to adjust my time schedule. And I said, thank you. Thank you for letting me
mm,
know that, or I would have missed this. And I'm so incredibly grateful to you. This has been so informative and inspiring. And so for the people watching and listening, how can people get in touch with you and learn more about you or experience your work?
thank you. Yes, thank you for having me because this has been fun. I really enjoyed this energy and this connection. Intuitivesoulhealing.com is my website. If you Google me, I come up. Also, I'm on Insight Timer app. You can download that. I have many meditations for free on that. You can follow me on there, Insight Timer. On Instagram, it's Conscious Creations, Conscious_Creations, Connecticut. And I post classes there. And yeah, and follow me on Facebook too. I have a group, How to Work with the Universe. But I think Instagram is where I post the most right now. And then also my website, if you want a consultation reading, I do mediumship, healing, readings, and shifting beliefs with theta healing, a powerful belief system. So yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Carolyn Coleridge.
Thank you for having me.